You're hanging out in the House of Sunny podcast, where it's always sunny, mostly because of your host, comedian and YouTuber, Sunny Loman. Want to know what Sunny and her friends are thinking about this week? Well, here she is, Sunny Loman.
Hey, welcome everybody. Welcome to the show, the pre-Thanksgiving show. I don't know if we'll do a show next week, Doug. What do you think?
We could do one.
We could do one.
But I don't think many people listen over Thanksgiving because they're stuffed with turkey and whatnot.
They're passed out. They can't concentrate. They're watching sports.
Yeah, they don't care what we say.
Right.
Take a break.
Take a break from politics and stuff. But I think if we do a podcast, we'll do something unpolitical. We'll figure something out and do something more personal and family oriented. So, okay. Today we're going to kind of get back into the topic that we keep getting into lately because it just keeps coming up. We did a show called "Is It Okay to Be a Slutty Comedian?" about, should that Christian right-wing comedian be canceled by the Christians because he happened to be sort of slutty. We did a show, that was number 75, Is It Okay to Be a Slutty Comedian? We did a show talking about Douglas Murray's new book, The Madness of Crowds, where we said it seems like people are dividing up into two groups in every group, whether it's objectivists, libertarians, Democrats, Republicans, where it seems like there's people who they're sort of shunning and they're insulting and they don't want to have conversation, and those that do and think that that's the way to go no matter what the idea is. And of course we fall on the side of let's have the conversations. We did, what else? I think we talked about just in general, we've been pro Alex Jones, for example, even though we don't agree with everything he says or all of his methods or whatever, we don't think it's right that he got mass deplatformed. And I totally stand by that. I mean, the internet is way less interesting now that they've kicked off all the interesting people, And I think we've said, like with conspiracy theories, you need to have fringes that are looking into this crazy stuff. Some of it's real.
Absolutely.
So who's going to ever find the real stuff if nobody's willing to sort of look? It's like a scientist. You would never have innovation in science if you weren't willing to be like just crazy, like entertain crazy hypotheses. I wonder what's going on here,
Right, exactly. Just to quickly jump in, because you made me think of something. I was considering joining this group on Facebook or something, and the description and warning was, hey, we don't tolerate conspiracy theorists here, and that includes anti-vaxxers, flat earthers, and 9/11 truthers.
Yeah.
As if believing in a flat earth is equal to challenging the efficacy or dangers of vaccines or being concerned that we're not being told the whole story on 9/11. Like, to bundle those three things together is exactly part of the point you're making,
well,
which is
exactly how they do it, isn't it? I mean,
it's a package deal of
the package dealing, the epistemological package dealing going on in our society is really stifling thinking and thought. And for example, I mean, that's a perfect example. All those things are completely unequal. And how do you unpackage that? Because it's like, now I got to go back and go, well, wait a sec. Okay, yeah, no, I'm not a flat earther, but now you're qualifying stuff. And it's like, it just shuts down the ability to have rational, calm debate about a narrower subject. And in today's political climate, the left has been very successful at labeling everyone on the right a racist. Everyone. I don't care if you think you're virtue signaling to the left, they think you're a racist if you're on the right. And they just automatically sling that out there, no matter what your ideas are. And so, and there are racists on the right and there are racists on the left. So should real racists be shunned? I mean, I think that's kind of the question. And so the reason this has come up again in terms of just what has happened is that Michelle Malkin was fired from her I don't really know if the word fired is right. She was a speaker for young, Young American Libertarians or something, or
Okay.
YAL. It's the same group that Ben Shapiro speaks at. Like, they fund a lot of university talks. It's a college campus, libertarian college campus club that's nationwide. They're very successful. I remember looking at that and thinking, man, if they could do that in a few years, why didn't the Ayn Rand Institute ever have a nationwide objectivist club thing going on? Because that thing just like, it seemed like a little bit of funding, and they had a centralized organization, and boom, they had a club in every college,
Yeah. Because they're good at what they do.
Yeah, they were really organized. They put it together. They brought in speakers, and she was one of the speakers, and they've basically kicked her off of that roster. So I don't know if she was getting a certain number of speeches and guaranteed a certain number of speeches, whatever. Who knows what their arrangement was, but she's basically, no longer, they've disassociated from her simply because she made a speech that said, I will not disavow this clump of people who are kind of more on the fringe in terms of their ideas. That included Gavin McInnes, who I just can't even believe he's fringe. But I guess, if you're irreverent and funny and you have a goddamn sense of humor, you've crossed the line at some point over and over. Right. And he's the founder of Proud Boys, who are all mixed race people that they're calling racist because they defend people on the right. I mean, here's the thing, too. I feel like people don't realize how sneaky this is and that all of this is coming from the left. And so when the right jumps on this bandwagon, they're actually supporting the leftist narrative. And I don't think a lot of people realize that.
Exactly what they're doing.
But, this is a war, you guys. Like, you cannot support the left. And I'm not saying that you say, oh, well, since we can't support the left, we should welcome actual bad ideas, that we shouldn't challenge bad ideas. You should absolutely challenge bad ideas, but challenging bad ideas isn't slinging insults at people on the right that you don't agree with.
Right. And exactly.
And firing them and canceling them and so on. That's gonna, and that is what we do and what we've done for decades, because they control the culture, including our culture, the culture of the people on the right.
And the left has put the right on the defensive by assuming this moral high ground of being anti-racist.
What's so funny about that is they're the thickest racists of all, with this white privilege bullshit and the identity politics. They're literally all racists. But somehow we're over here, desperate to show that we clean house and we don't associate with racists.
Yeah, and in the meantime, because that term is flung around as a smear and as a means of chilling debate and stifling conversations, the term no longer has any coherence. Like, I don't even know what people mean by it. It used to mean, when you just disavow or judge someone purely on the basis of their race, and that's not what it means anymore. Now it means something about power structure, and there's this whole leftist narrative that's upended the right-wing argument that anyone can be a racist if you judge people based on their race. And so this term doesn't even have coherence anymore. Now it's just meant to scare people into submission. And you can't, as a right-wing person, you can't accept those terms of debate. And when these types of groups virtue signal and try and show the left, no, we're really not racist.
We're the reasonable
stop
ones.
Calling me that name.
Yeah.
You're playing right into their hands. You should just say F you. We're not.
That's right.
And that's what Michelle Malkin did.
That's right.
That's what Michelle Malkin did.
That's right.
She said, screw you.
I'm not going to disavow
set the terms
these people.
of how I think about people and their ideas.
Exactly. And then she also said, and encouraged people on the right, she said, these people their ideas need to be engaged. And so here's I feel like I learned something this week from this whole thing, because what it really boiled down to, or what they were trying to get her on, was her association with, she doesn't have an association with, but her appreciation for Nick Fuentes, this young, he's like 22 years old. He makes memes. He causes groups of people to go to mainstream right-wing talks and troll the Q&A,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
so that he's trying to force taboo topics into the Q&A, and it doesn't. So he's being called a Holocaust denier, and of course, once you say Holocaust denier, now that person, we're not even allowed to talk to that person.
No, that's
Holocaust
like accusing
denier.
Someone of child molesting. You're
and
done.
I'm not even allowed to ask him, do you deny the Holocaust? What does that even mean, Holocaust denier? Does that mean it never happened, or it wasn't 6 million, it was 3 million? You know what I'm saying? It's not even clear what that means.
It's like climate denial.
But it's a shutdown. It's
the same genre.
The reason that is bad is it's mental. It's a mental shutdown. You can't think about these things if you just do the Holocaust denier, racist,
climate denier,
conspiracy theorist, it's all an epistemological. It's what Ayn Rand would call evasion. You're slamming your brain shut and no longer thinking. When you accept that if you do this, you're accepting the leftist method of thinking. And that is what I kind of think I figured out this last week, because this young punk has taught me something. I can't even believe it.
Yeah.
He has said there are no taboo topics. That is his mantra. And he is trying to force that. And then he's also said, isn't it interesting that there are no taboo topics on the left, they're all on the right. Mm-hmm. And so what he's trying to do, it's not that he necessarily agrees with these taboo topics. He's trying to bring them into the spotlight to force people to talk about them because he thinks that's healthy.
Of course it is. I mean, that's how ideas advance.
Maybe. Yeah, exactly. I mean, I don't know if his style is my favorite, but I actually didn't even look into it. I don't even care. It seems like he can be kind of a dick, but he's 22-year-old boy. I mean, let him be a dick. Who cares? Let him make
memes. If you have a better argument or a better idea, then just tell us. Tell us what it is. Right. I want to hear it. And why is it necessary to shut people down, to not engage with people? This is like a leftist idea
it is a leftist methodology.
It's a burn the book type of method. It's the Nazis burning books. It's religious people burning books.
Yes, it's anti-enlightenment. It is the anti-enlightenment and the anti-intellectualism and the objectivists who run around saying, oh, Trump is so anti-intellectual. Every time you call me a xenophobe because I'm for some restrictions on immigration and a goddamn secure border, you're book burning. You're anti-enlightenment. You're anti-ideas. You're anti-intellectual.
Yeah, when the founding fathers discussed the need for naturalization policy, did they say, that would be xenophobia? We can't even talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, these words, racist. I feel like I said this on my Facebook page last week, and nobody responded, so no, just kidding. I had a few comments, but what if we could actually just take those words out of the vocabulary for a week? What could we talk about if nobody could sling these insults? What subjects would actually fall on the table that we're not willing to discuss now because they're so charged? And then I was thinking about what Nick Fuentes says, no taboo topics, and a part of me is like, well, but I don't want to talk to racists. I don't want to talk to people who think all Jews are bad, and you know what I mean? Like, that's icky. Those people are icky,
Yeah, but let's force them to say that, and then you say, no, there's no basis for that, and then you move on. You don't say someone who questions our policy towards Israel and wonders, hey, why are we sending hundreds of millions of dollars? And, what's the purpose of our policy in Israel? Is Israel doing the right thing? And blah, blah, blah. Those are all legitimate questions. If you shut that down by saying, oh, you questioning Israel, you're an anti-Semite, I'm not talking to you, that's irrational. That's an irrational method.
Let's say you have a group that is actually saying, just purely racist, like Jews are bad because they're Jews. They have these certain qualities because they're Jews, that make them bad people, that exploit everybody, that, they're responsible for all the ills in the world. Like, I mean, if you just, like, go read Nazi propaganda before the camps. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, let's say you have young people saying that stuff. If you say, racist, we're not talking to you, do you think that you're addressing their concerns?
No.
I mean, they probably
You're further radicalizing them.
Right. And
yeah.
Why those types of campaigns, the pre-Nazi or the Hitler campaign to blame the Jews for everything, why that can work is because there are kernels of truth in there. You have people hurting economically. You have multiculturalism spreading in the culture and telling all the Germans that they're worthless. And then you have a guy coming out and going, no, you're not worthless. In fact, you're better.
Yeah.
So, and that's happening now. We're seeing people being herded into white supremacy because nobody will engage them on real concerns that are actual problems caused by immigration.
Right.
Muslim immigration, Hispanic immigration, real problems in their communities that are making crime rise, that are making people miserable, even the economic stuff. Those are real things in their life that are destroying their values. And you can't just go, shut up, racist. That's not going to work. Then the next step for them is white supremacy.
Yeah.
They're going to join that club because that's the club that will solve their problems.
Yeah, exactly. Because they're sitting there saying, I'm being shut down. No one's really listening to us and addressing my concerns, and they're just smearing me. Okay, well, who is going to listen to me? Well, this group is going to listen to me. So the only way for political remediation at that point is to support a more radical group that will listen to you. And this is part of the basis of the whole Trump phenomenon. And it's part of the reason why there's such a divide in the country between people who are feeling the effects of liberal, or let's call them leftist progressive policies throughout the country, and those on the coast who are in gated communities living in $1 million mansions, wagging their finger at them, telling them they're bad people. That's not a recipe to solve problems. That's a recipe for a civil war.
Right. And so I just think for those of us committed to discussion and ideas and the Enlightenment and intellectualism, that actually means no taboo topics. And I think that's kind of what I learned this week from Nick Fuentes. And Michelle Malkin is saying the same thing, that these people must be engaged and there shouldn't be taboo topics. And then I got to thinking, because Nick Fuentes also says there are no taboo topics on the left, just on the right, and he's right. So here's an example. In your own life, think about this. When, like Ben Shapiro says, we can't engage we need to shun and cancel and disengage from Nazis within our own group and keep ourselves pure, and in order to rise above, what the left is doing. We can't sink to their level kind of thing. But what he will do is engage a person on the left who believes in white privilege. He'll engage that person, and maybe he will refer to that person as racist, but he won't shun the Democrat that associates with the person who believes in white privilege and is racist, right? But on the right, not only will we not engage with Nick Fuentes, but we'll shun a person who won't disavow him.
It's a double standard.
It's a total double standard. So, like, you have Democrat friends, and they have allowed the concepts of white privilege, et cetera, to bleed into their conception of the world.
To the point where they're saying, white people, shut up.
Yeah.
Stop talking.
Yeah.
You're bad.
And they're
You're
fine
vicious.
with that, and you're not shunning them, but you're going to shun Michelle Malkin, someone who is a brave, with a lot of integrity, the opposite of a sellout. She's been very consistent and a very tough fighter for values on the right. And you're going to shun her, but not your Democrat friend.
Right.
Who will admit to you, yeah, I don't really like that white privilege stuff, but like that person's okay, but Michelle Malkin has to be canceled.
Exactly. Yeah,
And
that's. Go ahead.
the solution is no taboo topics.
Yeah, it's sort of like the idea that you know, I rather let 100 guilty people go free than imprison one, wrongly convicted guy. That old principle in criminal justice. It's like I rather engage with one really bad, crazy guy than shut or 100 crazy guys than shut down like one reasonable person. When you do something like, oh, you're a climate denier, I'm not going to talk to you. That is so dangerous.
Yeah. Or the anti-vax, pro-vax thing kills me because as somebody who's sick, I know, first of all, you can't lump all drugs into a group and call them just vaccines.
Vaxes. Yeah.
There are 25, 30 different vaccines there we're talking about, and each one has different risk-reward profiles. So you're really, and that medicine is so primitive. We don't know the immune system as well as you might think we do. So when and I think they've shown there's been, you can't get so many vaccines at once, like that they were starting to give kids and that was causing even more injury. So, we
there's a
figured
huge
that
scientific
out after
debate.
We hurt hundreds of kids or thousands of kids,
Of course, and everything in medicine and food. And
Yeah.
we know just from our own experience in 30 years that whatever they say today is probably the opposite. I mean, you just know that that's not, science is never certain about these things,
Right.
so you would just immediately say, well, wait a second, what's a vaccination? And wait, so a vaccination's never hurt anyone? You should never be cautious. You should never question your doctor. You should never question the FDA or the medical establishment about,
Right.
their
Never
protocols.
question the government CDC.
Yeah, never question the government's
Whatever.
protocols on medicines. And then at the same time, something like climate, where it's like, well, what do you mean the climate changes every day, every second? Do you mean it's never changed in 1,000 years? Do you mean it's never changed in 50 years, or it's changing so fast we can't stop it and it's all because of man? But what are the benefits and the pros and cons of fossil fuel energy and how much it benefits us versus the potential dangers and the uncertainty of climate modeling and those kinds of things. So you're just going to lump anyone who has any questions at all into the climate denier camp and shut them out and burn their books.
Yeah.
That's what they're doing. And so, yes, there are crazy people. And even in the 9/11 thing, I study that stuff a lot, and I have huge questions and concerns about 9/11 and the aftermath, and our decision to go into Iraq, and all that stuff. There's genius level scholars who question this stuff, and so to lump that in with like flat Earth, or someone who says, oh, there are lizard creatures on Mars that are coming to it, someone without any. In other words, there are different. There's a spectrum of credibility when someone proposes an idea, and you have to hear the idea and understand the evidence they're putting forth. Then you assess the idea. You say, well, yeah, when someone says something about the Holocaust, like you said, are they saying, no, the estimate of 6 million, that's not really true. There were less people killed. And then you'd say, well, okay, well, so what? But you'd go on and on. Or do they just say, nope, there was no Nazis, there were no Jews, this never happened? What, like
a moon
exactly
hoax thing, like the moon landing hoax, like never happened, even though there's.
Yeah, but even that, there's evidence for that. So you'd question it and say, well, what's the evidence? And what's the evidence for it? And let's talk about it. And then when you get to someone to a point where they say, you know what, I don't have any evidence for my view. I just think something weird happened, with the moon landing, or something weird happened with 9/11, or I don't know anything about vaccines. I just don't know. If someone's at that level, you don't engage with them anymore, because then you're, what's the point? They're irrational. But if someone is presenting a case and it's valid, then let's listen to it.
Well, and
what's wrong with that?
too. So these trolls, these Nick Fuentes trolls, show up at a Charlie Kirk talk and they say stuff like, Google Jews, Israelis dancing, or something like that. Israelis really like to dance. And I guess the thing is that there's some evidence that some Israelis were celebrating 9/11.
Yes, that's true.
Okay, so big deal. So address it and go, okay, what, you expect Jews to all think alike and all be the same? Like that's not true.
Yeah, but there may have been evidence that those people were associated with Mossad. Okay, what is the evidence? Tell me what it is.
Right.
Why do you know? Okay, let's go forward with that.
I want a t-shirt that says no taboo topics, because this is like the new thing. And I mean, I think Nick Fuentes is right. I can't believe I learned something from, like, I will talk to a Nazi. Why can't I go read their blog, Stormtrooper Daily, or whatever the hell they call it? Why not?
And then you say, this is why it's wrong, and I don't want to engage with it, or whatever.
Yeah.
But
it's not okay to punch a Nazi. This is America. We are the height of the Enlightenment era. No taboo topics, everybody. That's my message today.
Yeah, you're much better. We're better off. And this whole idea of smearing people and not engaging with people, there's a deep root to that, because it's, where does this come from? This comes from the idea that, and where this is coming from, this is my theory anyways, and I think this is right. But so, you start with this Marxist idea that there's the oppressed and oppressors. And then you throw a little bit of determinism into this in terms of, well, people are all determined by their class and their race because they're oppressed by, the capitalist society and the patriarchy. So then you start, and just follow me for a second down this, this isn't like a professional exposition. This is just like a rough chain of logic. But, you have this oppressors oppressed, and you have this sort of determinism in terms of, these poor people, they're born into a certain class or race or something, and then they're oppressed because they're a woman or a black or they're poor or whatever, the standard Marxist narrative. And then those people, who are historically oppressed, like, have no chance. And so, anyone who defends or argues for capitalism, they're part of the power structure. They're part of the privilege. They're part of the people that are oppressing these marginalized people. And so anything they say can't be valid because they're only speaking from, their own self-interest in oppressing these other people, because all they care about is power and control and perpetuating their own privilege. So, in other words, this whole type of thinking of don't listen to that guy because he's part of the established, because and I get this all the time from lefty people. Like, I say, hey, read this article. Oh, I'm not going to read that. That guy's from the Wall Street Journal, or that guy's from the oil company.
Fox News. Where'd you get that? Fox News.
Yeah, that guy's a shill for the oil companies. Like, as if there's no objective standard of truth where you can say, well, no, but look at his data, look at his chart,
right.
Look at what he like, and then trace back where that data came. Let's go through this and talk about it. It really is.
Yeah.
Because these people are saying you can't think objectively. There is no objective standard. There's only the powerful and the weak, and the powerful people are all biased. And we can't listen to them, shut them up, stop them from talking.
And that's what's going on Facebook with this fact checking and the ban, and like we can't mention the whistleblower's name. Don't do it, so I don't have to beep it out. People are starting this. This is so anti-free speech. This idea that people can't handle information, including bad or fake information. And I feel similarly. Like, I don't like the idea that. The universities are just propaganda machines, because I do think that people can be persuaded and they can be indoctrinated. But I think that the cure for this is not, let's ban those ideas and have our ideas. The cure is no taboo topics, and all topics must be discussed, and all ideas must be discussed.
And say why they're wrong. Say why they're right.
For a broader marketplace of ideas. So when you see Facebook fact-checking and throttling and shadow banning and trying to manage the news, and Twitter saying, well, we won't allow campaign ads because, there's been campaign after campaign where the person with the most money and the most ads still lost. Like, that happens.
Like Hillary Clinton?
Yeah, like Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump.
Of course.
So, but he got a lot of press. But there are other examples of like people who won just because the people got the message and they picked.
Well, again, this is a form of going back to my argument. this is the form of determinism that you're accepting when you support these kinds of campaigns. It's the idea that ideas, once they impinge on someone's mind, you can't control the outcome. So the left is saying we can't allow the oil companies, and Fox News and all these evil ogres of the right to speak, because when their ideas impinge on these dummies out there, they're like zombies that pick up the ideas and they run with these evil, like no one can think, no one's capable of integrating information with reason, so we have to just stand there and be a bulwark against any bad ideas getting out. And that's where you get into this, these censorship campaigns and the whole leftist idea of central committees and philosopher kings who plan society and tell you what's good for you and determine what you can read and what you can't read and who you can work with. And, all these things, that whole type of thinking, that's what leads politically to dictatorship and tyranny and oppression. And when you accept even a private company like Facebook or whatever doing these kinds of things, you're endorsing a certain thinking method.
Yes.
It's a thought method.
This is what I wanted to get at. This is the integration. It's literally enlightenment, reason, thinking, and then there's taboo topics. You know what I mean?
Yeah, don't talk about them.
Don't talk about it. Alex Jones. It's just Alex Jones, and he's too much.
And yet, Alex Jones is right about a lot of things.
Even if he were wrong about everything, we should.
Yeah, who cares?
We shouldn't shun him.
No, and let his people make their case. If you don't like him, don't listen to him or prove him wrong.
Yeah.
Or make him, or say, Alex, prove yourself right. Like, why are you right? Okay, well, I don't believe, your evidence is invalid, so I'm not going to accept it. And then you move on. But no, the left has to shut him down because they're afraid that his ideas are going to influence other people. And so they can't have that. You can't allow it. You can't allow, when they wanted to shut Fox News down or impose a fairness doctrine, remember that? And they wanted to throttle talk radio, and they want to stop campaign finance. They have these campaign finance laws that prevents corporations or people from donating money to politicians. And, this is all a means for them to burn books. And we have to fight back against that in every way it comes at you.
I get the instinct for this because I think I even said last week that we should ban like Soros money in this country because he's creating these organizations. But like that to me is a little bit different. This guy is actually creating organizations that are masquerading as science organizations that create these studies, and then another, leg in the triangle pulls that science and assaults a school board, and it's a planned assault, a planned propaganda assault against our local communities.
Yeah, and there's a difference between overthrowing a government, and particularly if he's a foreign organization, because he's not, because if we're going to ban other foreign organizations, then how can he, illegally work with our State Department, to spread propaganda? So there's a whole nother set of ideas there, though, that has to do with
part of that
taxpayer money and overthrowing government. Yeah,
and it's the government.
But can George Soros speak? Can George Soros have an organization that promotes a certain thing? Sure, fine, say it.
Yeah,
I don't care. I'll argue with you. But if someone's in the back room pulling levers and pull pedaling and they're starting to control the levers of government, you get into a different level of concern when people are doing things like that. But the general point is ideas can't be shut down. And that's what these people are trying to do. They're trying to say some ideas can't be discussed.
Well, and so what the right needs to stand for is the opposite of that. And unfortunately, you have the Christians shutting down a comedian because he was like a normal guy, a normal 2020 guy in 2020. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Maybe that doesn't fit with the morals from 100 years ago. And I'm not saying that that's the right way to live, but you got a semi-famous comedian who's trying to get in girls' pants.
Mm-hmm.
And so that guy should be canceled. That's what the Christians say. And then you have Ben Shapiro saying we can't engage Nick Fuentes because he's a Holocaust denier, and I won't discuss that. And by the way, he has come out and said explicitly that he is absolutely not a Holocaust denier. So I believe him, He's said that directly. I think he's trolling, and people want him to not do that.
Yeah, because they're showing up at conservative events like Don Jr. events and stuff like that, and they're asking really tough questions.
Well,
and they're trolling these guys.
Up topics that are taboo,
yeah.
that are odious and taboo, because they're trying to break down the taboo topic. That is so smart. I just feel like, wow, this little kid, he's like taught me something.
Well, yeah, and I've been at talks before where someone in the crowd ask something kind of off the wall. And, the first instinct I have as someone in the crowd is, oh, come on, you can't ask that. That's ridiculous. And then you're like, well, wait a second. Yeah, that's crazy. That's off the wall. But let me hear this guy's answer. And if it's a good speaker, they'll say, well, what's the premise here that you're basing this on? Is there any validity to it? What's your reasons for asking that? And how do you base this on that? And then let's just break it down and unpackage it. And then I'm going to show you why you're an idiot. And if they do that, that guy is way less powerful than he would be if you said, get him out of here.
Right.
Police, seize him, throw him out. Because then that guy becomes a martyr.
Yeah.
And then he starts to look for more radical.
Well, but also people who identify with the problems that he's bringing up end up getting sucked into his vortex because he's the only one talking about them.
Or, yeah, and you could say to that guy, well, wait a second, what's your real, if you break down people's problems and their claims, oftentimes there's some other concern that's driving what they're saying. So if you really talk to someone, you can oftentimes say, well, you're kind of wrong about this claim, but I see where you're coming from and I see why you're concerned about that. And here's a better way to think about this whole issue in your life. You're really concerned about this. And so, but when you just say, seize him, get him out of here, burn his book, this guy's evil. What does that do? How does that advance anything?
I was having whatever that dinging is. What is that dinging?
That's my phone. That's my cell phone. Okay. I'm so popular that it's just dinging off the hook.
Your phone's blowing up. So I had an idea before that ding.
I was saying, don't seize him.
Yeah. But then there was something. Oh, I know what I was going to say. I was having an exchange on Facebook with somebody about this issue with Michelle Malkin and Nick Fuentes, and saying, she should not be fired from her speaking. And they're like, well, they have a right to have anybody speak that they want to speak. And can we have a moral pronouncement here? I mean, yeah, maybe they're not saying they don't like her ideas. They're saying they don't like this other person's idea her idea, I guess, that they don't like is that she's not willing to disavow people. And then as I'm having this discussion, I said, I don't really know Nick Fuentes, and I don't really care. It doesn't matter what he is or what he has said. And the guy was like, well, he's one of those Charlottesville people. Oh, that's another slur. He was at Charlottesville, therefore canceled. Not we can't talk to him,
But was he one of the guys at Charlottesville that just legitimately had a permit and wanted to protest removing statues?
Yeah.
Or was he saying, let's kill the Jews? What does that mean he was at Charlottesville? What do you mean by that?
And if he was saying, let's kill the Jews, why? What's his beef? What's he got against the Jews? What does he think they're doing?
Yeah, let's hear it. Let's hear your conspiracy about the Jews.
Yeah.
Why don't you tell the whole world about it right now? So, and if it's ridiculous and there's no basis for it, then you're going to look like an idiot. It's give those guys, shine the light on them.
Absolutely. So no taboo topics. I think that's
But if he's just saying, well, I'm concerned about Zionism and our policy with Israel and it's inflaming the Middle East. That's legitimate.
My
that's
brother
totally
died in Afghanistan fighting for Israel, and it's not right. And
I agree with Tulsi Gabbard that we shouldn't be, we shouldn't have foreign policy interests there. And that's totally reasonable. Is he saying that, or do you just shut him down because he's got some issue with Israel? just stop that.
Or that he said it in the way he did. I mean, I think you can, if you get to the underlying concern that people say things, I hate them, or, they have this there's something emotional in the way they're expressing it. But if you dig deep, there is something real under there usually. And nobody comes out and says, I hate Jews for no reason. Like there's some pain that they think is caused by that. So I just, this is just
but also, Sonny, there's a history of anti-Semitism, like actual like Jew hatred, and there's actual, so let's go back and understand this. Like, where is this coming from? Because there's some Jews that question and are very opposed to Israel's policies and what they did Jews in the 1940s, when Sanders. Israel was formed and the 1967 war, and so okay, that's one thing. But are we going back to historical anti-Semitism, like over hundreds of years that kind of climaxed in Nazi Germany and other genocides that have occurred throughout, the history. And like, let's go back and understand this history from, like the Shylock character in Shakespeare. And, there's like, why are we just say, nope, you don't like, nope, anti-Semite, can't talk about it. Don't even want to think about it. Just move on. Charlottesville person. Nope.
Yeah.
Because I want to understand these things. I've tried to do a lot of research on the historical roots of anti-Semitism. Like, where is this coming from? Like, where, and trying to understand the, World War I and, the history of Europe and like where these people came from. And then you go back to biblical times and, there's just a deep history here. And we have such a superficial way of approaching problems. Like, I'm open to anyone sort of saying anything and then just saying, of course I'm not going to waste my time on certain things, but other things I'm like, well, let me hear it. Like, why do you think that? That's interesting.
Right. Yep. So that's what I think. What do you think, everybody out there listening? Are there taboo topics? And how do we integrate that with, say, saying, like, I feel like this country, given that it's a national security threat, could do something about George Soros and could do something about mosques. I don't think Islam is a religion. I think it is, but it's a overthrow the existing government religion. So I think that in order to protect ourselves, we could actually, limit the number of mosques in this country.
Well, I had written a post about this, and I think the question that you're asking is right, because what we're saying is ideas in abstract are protected and always should be protected. And it's necessary for us to survive and live happy lives to be able to think freely. However, the line I think that you draw is when someone's trying to actively plot to overthrow the government, because there's, if you and I are plotting to overthrow the government or to commit a crime, we don't say, well, we have free speech, we can commit a crime. So if you're engaged in a criminal action or your ideas are
incitement of violence or something like that.
Incitement is like immediacy, like you're saying, we got to do something right now.
Let's
so
go kill those Jews right now would be something I wouldn't condone or engage in.
Or when you have state sanction. So, if you're, a religious group, like the, Shinto or the Japanese religion, if you're just talking about Shinto in 19th century America, no problem. But if the Japanese empire says that's the state religion and now we have an army and we're going to take over the world, that's different. Now you have a political actor, a state actor supporting an ideology and trying to overthrow the world. So could you have banned people who were professing like Japanese religion during World War II? Yes, you can, because that's an ideology and a group that's engaged in trying to overthrow the country. So I'm just saying that there's like a more complicated line, but the question we're kind of talking about now is ideas like abstractly, just someone talking about whatever, their view of history or their view of people or, what their view of politics is or whatever, not someone who's engaged in trying to actually overthrow our government or change our political institutions like now, through some insidious way.
Right. Yeah, I think that is the difference. And that just goes to applying principles in context. So if your principle is no taboo topics, well, there is a line where it becomes a clear and present danger that you have to do something. And the problem is that I think, the left is saying it's okay to punch a Nazi because that's like a clear and present danger. They've decided that speech is violence, and that certain speech, this hate speech or whatever, which by the way, they're the most hateful, but it doesn't matter. The hate speech they don't like, I just hate that term in general. It's a dumb term. But speech they don't like is violent speech, and so therefore it should be stopped. That's their argument, is that they recognize that that's rational to have a line there where when you cross it and you get into overthrow and violence and actually hurting people, like, incitement and real harm, they've taken that line, though, and they've moved it way over to, you've hurt my feelings.
Yes, and the Supreme Court defines incitement as immediacy. Like, it has to be like right now you're saying, go kill that guy. And that's rational because it recognizes the nature of cognition. Like if someone's saying, Sonny, right now, someone's trying to kill you, go get him. You don't have time to weigh evidence. So, if someone's inciting you falsely and causing you danger and causing someone else danger, that's not protected. But when you just say, hey, someone can say something and it can have an effect. And the chain of effect is something I don't like. Like, I say I like George Bush. And so if someone says that, well, that might mean they like Republicans, and Republicans are bad because they might make war on Iran. And I don't like that. So, oh my God, that's causing violence. Saying you like George Bush, there's a chain of events that leads to you advocating violence.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, that's the kind of thing that they're after. They're not saying immediacy, like, go kill this guy now. They're saying anything that I don't like or that makes me uncomfortable, that causes stress, that induces some sort of chemical effect in me that I don't like, and that's a recipe for complete Nazi dictatorship in our country.
Right.
Like fascist dictatorship. And because everything affects everything.
What do you think psychologically is going on with people on the right who want taboo topics, who are okay with Alex Jones being deplatformed, who don't think Nick Fuentes should send his trolls to a talk because it's too uncomfortable, who think anyone who was at Charlottesville should be unpersoned and not discussed, and don't discuss anything with anyone. Gavin McInnes should be deplatformed because he advocated self-defense against Antifa. And that was incitement, supposedly, which it isn't. But, there are people on the right, and now they're throwing Michelle Malkin under the bus. There's definitely, I don't know what that is. Like, what are they expecting? Do they really think that makes them, I think they do think it makes them more moral and more pure somehow. If, talk about immigration, I'm just going to call you a racist. I'm not going to talk to you about your ideas. I'm just going to call you a racist and a xenophobe because that's what we know you are, because obviously you think that there shouldn't be more brown people here because all those people happen to be brown. That to me is like actually racist. I didn't notice the skin color. Like, I'm not talking about the fucking shade of their skin. I don't care that a Somalian is black. I care that he's a Somalian.
Yeah, there's a difference between culture and genetics, and so
and some Somalis are all right in my book, like Ayaan Hirsi Ali, who's like a great heroic woman.
Right.
So, but I can't even get into that. I'm just called a racist if I think there shouldn't be any more Somali immigration into this country, period, and deport all the ones who lied on their immigration applications.
Right.
Like Omar, what's her name? Ilhan Omar.
Yeah,
I think she should go
fraud.
Back.
Yep.
And her whole family.
Yep. They lied to get in. They committed fraud.
Here. They committed fraud to be here. They should go back, and we should start enforcing our immigration laws.
But to get to your question, I think a lot of the people.
On that tangent? Was that a pride rant?
Yeah, probably. I mean, you were asking about like why the people on the right feel that way. Are they? And I would take a crack at it and say, they're not intellectually confident people who are willing, like I'm willing to listen to any argument and just say, okay, well, this is why I think you're wrong, or this is why I think you're right. So part of it's moral confidence, but I'm also not worried about popularity. And so, these people, particularly those probably in the political realm.
Charlie Kirk, Ben Shapiro. You think they're worried about popularity?
No, I think they're worried about being called names and the effect that that can have on them, like, because they're out there. And so they're kind of like trying to virtue signal to the mob that, oh, no. Yeah, I may be right wing, but I'm one of the good right wing guys or something like that. So they have this sense that they have to be careful lest they be, completely depersoned by the mobs, which they've already been. I mean, I don't even know where they draw the line there.
They haven't been, though. They're not. They're still on Facebook. They're still on YouTube. They didn't get the Alex Jones treatment.
Yeah, true.
I mean, you didn't get the Milo Yiannopoulos treatment, the Gavin McInnes treatment. All these people down, Paul Joseph Watson, all of these people are in the taboo, the unpersoned area, and you don't really hear from them as much as you used to because they don't have the same ability. They don't have the same reach. So you do lose popularity, and you do lose access. You do lose money, most likely.
Yeah. And if your career depends on it, so there's a fear factor. And I also think that there's a moral certainty and an intellectual confidence factor. And there's probably, to some extent, it's maybe evasion brought on by those fears. Like I just don't want to, why, I'm out there.
Get away. This is going to be bad for me. Get away.
This is going to be bad for me. There's no reason I need to engage with this, because there's no upside for me in engaging with it, because people are going to call me a racist. Like if we had a more liberal society, and I mean that in the right way, not the political way, the classically liberal way, I think anyone could just bring up anything, and good intellectuals would say, well, here's my take on that. Yeah. And we would move on.
Can you imagine how great that would be if we could talk about anything?
But that's kind of the way it was even 20 years ago. Like when I was in college, it was like you could go to a talk and someone could kind of say anything almost. Yeah. And it was like some things were probably beyond the pale, of course. But I mean,
it was starting to creep in when I was in college, where there were definitely this sort of PC stuff, and multiculturalism was kind of being launched on us in a big way, with diversity studies popping up into the universities and everything. But even then,
true, I shouldn't romanticize it, because look at like Lenny Bruce. I mean, that guy was being arrested in the 60s. Well, there's always been some level of censorship.
I think there was,
coming from some angle.
The 70s, 80s were pretty free. Like, you got past the Lenny Bruce phase, so now profanity and sex and all of these taboo topics became available to people.
And you could see that in the culture, in the TV shows and the movies of that time, the All in the Family, Archie Bunker. And
the 80s is full of racial humor. I mean, there is so much racial humor. And I actually think that the 80s helped people heal from racism and come together. And at the end of the 80s, I would say was probably the peak, like maybe even 90s. Hip hop was huge. People, there were A-list black actors and actresses. There were politicians, like all of the sort of barriers to entry. There were CEOs that are women and blacks, and like all of this stuff kind of came to fruition in the 80s, all the sort of liberation movements of the 60s. And then now we're slamming the lid on that in a bigger way.
Yeah, I don't know if it happened. I think the 80s, I don't know. I mean, you could do a sociological study on it, but it certainly has not gotten better. And I think that this movement of the last couple of years, this white privilege idea as it's crept into the public consciousness now, is going to start a war. It's going to start a civil war, because you can't, just like you couldn't classify a group of people, blacks, and enslave them and say they're bad, they're innately evil or bad or stupid, and not result in a civil war and the 60s and all the things that have happened in the civil rights era. You can't then turn around and say, oh, yeah, and now white people are evil by their nature and innately bad and bad people, and we got to shut them up and stop them from talking. And, that's not the solution either. It's the same thing. So, why we went in the civil rights era from, hey, let's just all be equal and treat each other as individuals, to, no, we got to get whitey now and shut him up.
It's revenge.
Why have we done that?
It's revenge. But I guess I'm just saying that I think there was a peak free speech time. That's what I'm saying. And I think it was the 80s. And I think it was kind of that post civil rights, post sexual repression, like everything just was available in the 80s. And then by the time I got to college in the 90s, the PC thing was starting, or was gaining momentum, I should say.
Yeah.
So you're right, it was better, but it wasn't when we were in college, but it was starting to go the other direction now.
Yeah, because I was having classes about how all of Western civilization and in the humanities was about race,
right,
and gender, and that was in the 80s and 90s. So
the early 90s, right.
So that's been happening for 50 years, and now this is
here we are.
This is what here we are.
Yeah. So okay, what have we learned? No taboo topics.
No taboo topics.
All right. That's it for the show today. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next week for some kind of Thanksgiving special.
Thanks for listening to the House of Sunny podcast. Go check out Sunny on YouTube at her channel, House of Sunny. Everything Sunny does is fan-funded, and because she's likely to get kicked off and demonetized on every platform at some point, please support her over at patreon.com/House of Sunny. Become one of Sunny's elite squad and have access to behind-the-scenes footage, t-shirts, special events, and more.